Well, welcome back to our Read Through the Bible, and today we're picking up in the book of First Chronicles. Now, as we were ending the book of Second Kings the other day, I ended with a phrase something like this: we come to the story of the end of Judah, and that is very true. That was the end of the southern kingdom, but that's not the end of the nation of Israel, because Judah is carried into captivity. And they're there for a period of 70 years. And then they come back. And as you pick up in the book of First Chronicles, the first 9 chapters deal with the genealogies. A very long section of the Bible, sometimes confusing and difficult to read. But these 9 chapters give us the genealogy. So when the Jews that are coming back, they were from Judah, they were from Benjamin, there were Levites, and there were representatives of all the tribes, because the seed of all the tribes is preserved. But primarily, the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, Simeon has been incorporated into Judah, and also the tribe of Levi, which is spread out, or was spread out in the 48 Levitical cities back during the time of the united and divided monarchy. So we now come to this period known as the post-exilic, after the exile. They're coming back. Now, Chronicles is going to pick up on the whole history of especially the southern kingdom, but it is so that those returning exiles will have a continuity and a record to preserve, in particular, 4 lines: the kingly line, the priestly line, the Levitical line, which is closely related, obviously, to the priestly line, and most importantly, the line through which Jesus will come. So let's pick up in 1 Chronicles chapter 1. Now, as they begin this, they go all the way back to creation itself. So in 1 Chronicles chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, it gives us the line from Adam and his sons to Noah and his sons, from Adam to Noah, and Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Verses 5 through 16 will deal with the descendants of Japheth and Ham. And then we'll move beyond that, because we're going to deal with the descendants of Shem. And verses 70 and following, it talks about the descendants of Shem. This is the ancestor of the Jewish people, all the Semitic people, but in particular Abraham, from Shem to Abraham. And then it'll also throw in Abraham's descendants in some of these kind of dead-end lines. For example, you will see that Abraham will have descendants through Ishmael. He will have descendants through his concubine Keturah. But they're not going to be of the line that's going to come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're all going to have a dead end. And then for Isaac's son, Esau, it's going to kind of give his line, but again, that line is going to come to a dead end. So as you come into 1 Chronicles chapter 2, here we deal with the 12 sons of Jacob, which become obviously the 12 tribes. And it goes on to deal with the line from Judah to David, because Judah is extremely important. And then the rest of the chapter gives an extended genealogical record of Judah's descendants, emphasizing here some of Caleb's descendants. And this is very, very, very important, because Caleb has a very significant place in the history of the tribe of Judah. Then in 1 Chronicles chapter 3, we have the record of the genealogical record of David and his wives. Verses 10 through 16 of 1 Chronicles chapter 3 records David's descendants, most of whom were the kings of Judah, from Solomon to Zedekiah. And then in verse 16, it mentions Jeconiah. Jeconiah is also known as Coniah. This is another name for Jehoiachin. And this is interesting. Let me just take a moment to talk about this, because Jehoiachin is in the line that goes from Solomon to Jesus through Joseph. Now, you know that Joseph's blood really is not in Jesus, because Joseph obviously is not the biological father. But here's why Joseph is important, and this line is important. It describes the legal right of Jesus to be king through the line of the kings. Now, as we're going to see, the line of Mary, which is the line that actually has blood in Jesus, the God-man, God becoming man, so he has to have this human biological kind of component, because he is God and man. Well, that comes through Mary. Now, while that's important, and listen to me, Jeconiah, there was a curse pronounced on him that his descendants would not be in the line of Jesus. Well, how can you say this since Jeconiah is in that line that leads from Solomon to Joseph? Well, you can say this because Jeconiah does not have actual physical blood in Jesus. I hope that makes some understanding. We'll come back to that later. That actually comes through Solomon's brother Nathan on his side. And as you kind of read the genealogies of Luke, it goes into a lot of detail there that Solomon will not be in the line of Jesus through Mary. In Matthew's genealogy, Solomon will be in the line of Jesus through Joseph. But it is Solomon's brother Nathan, both sons of David. So the line of David is preserved through both Mary and Joseph. Fascinating if you'd never kind of thought about that. A lot of research there, a lot of time we could spend talking about that. But anyway, 1 Chronicles 4 deals with the genealogies of some of the other tribes, Asher and Simeon, and it presents the story of Jabez. Very important. You remember that the Bible tells us about Jabez. He was more honorable than his brethren. He called upon God in prayer. Remember that beautiful prayer, the prayer of Jabez, enlarge my border. Let your hand be with me and protect me. And the Bible says about him that God granted him what he requested. Beautiful. 1 Chronicles 5 goes back and picks up the story of some of the other sons of Jacob. And 1 through 10 deals with Reuben. Now remember, Reuben's the firstborn. He should have had the birthright, but that sad, tragic story of how he defiled his father's concubine, that story there, the birthright is then passed to Joseph and his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. But the leader, the messianic line, is passed on to Judah. So Reuben loses the birthright, and the record of his genealogy is there in those first 10 verses. Then in verses 11 through 17, it deals with Gad's record. And it talks about, in the rest of the chapter, kind of all the tribes east of the Jordan River. Remember those tribes? Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, the half-tribe of Manasseh. And they actually go into exile around probably 740 to 732, even though it's a part of the northern kingdom, and the northern kingdom does not fall to Assyria until 722. The Assyrians came and got that part of it even before they took the area of Samaria west of the Jordan River. Well, let's move into 1 Chronicles 6 here. The chapter presents a genealogical record of Levi. Going back to the sons now, this is Jacob's third son. Now, this is very important, and a lot of detail is given here because this is the priestly line. Levi, Aaron, Phinehas, Zadok, Hilkiah. Remember, Hilkiah found the law in the temple as they were rebuilding it during the time of Josiah, up to Sarai, up to Joshua, the high priest, when they came back after the deportation. He's the first of those that comes back. And then the rest of the 6 chapters, 16 and 30, deals with the sons of Levi and their families. And then in 31 through 48, it talks about the musicians. The musicians are going to be very important in the worship of God going forward. And then it repeats kind of the genealogy of the high priests and even records the Levitical cities. And the Levites were scattered out while Israel was during the period of the united and divided monarchy. And the Levites, it was important for them to teach. And that function is now important as they're coming back. They're to teach the people the truth. That original part of their purpose, assist the priest, work in the temple, but also have this teaching ministry to teach. Well, 1 Chronicles 7, we have the genealogy of some more of the tribes. The first 5 verses, the genealogy of Issachar. Second 7 verses, the genealogy of Benjamin. Naphtali is included in that. Then the genealogy of the half-tribe of Manasseh that's west of the Jordan. Remember, part of it was east, part of it was west. Then the genealogy of Ephraim, and then Asher. And these are all shorter. And there's 3 reasons why the genealogies of the tribes to the north are shorter. One, they're in the north, so they're not predominant, although they are represented in the post-exilic group that comes back from Babylon. They're not predominant. Secondly, there's no priest. The tribe of Levi has that. And thirdly, there's no king coming. That was the line of Judah that leads up to Jesus. So they have a smaller role. Although if you go and read the book of Revelation, even in the future, it talks about these 12 tribes, so they maintain their distinctiveness. And this was part of the reason for these long genealogies, to give the distinctiveness for the nation of Israel, for the different tribes. Then you kind of might ask yourself even this day, why is it that Israel was able to maintain such an identity without having a nation for 2,000 years, from 70 AD to 1948, well, almost 2,000 years? Well, the answer of it is partly given in these genealogies. They keep these very long records. Well, this brings us to 1 Chronicles 8. A lot of discussion here is given on the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamin is important because Benjamin is right next to Judah. In fact, it kind of almost divides Jerusalem. The line between Judah and the line of Benjamin, it kind of goes right in there. So a lot of Benjamin is kind of very close to Judah. So it gives a lot of their genealogies because they are very, very, very important, as is Levi. And then when you get to the end of this discussion in chapter 8, it picks up a lot on the genealogy of Saul. And that's important because Saul becomes the first king of Israel. In fact, it's going to repeat that in 1 Chronicles 9. So let's talk a moment about 1 Chronicles 9. This is the last chapter that we're going to look at today. But 1 Chronicles 9 kind of begins, you're in the middle of Babylonian exile. Verses 2 through 9 talk about the returning descendants of Judah and the leaders in Benjamin, the returning priests, the returning Levites, and the other returning Levites, and what duties they'll have, such as there'll be gatekeepers, there'll be those in the service of the temple, bringing the sacrifices for the great altar, the furnaces, the singing, all that. So they're already planning when they come back to rebuild the temple, and of course, Ezra and Nehemiah. We'll get into that, and the temple worship that will be back, and you'll see this going forward. But they're already planning to rebuild the temple, and so chapter 9, and this is before you get the historical sections of 1 Chronicles, which will be 10 through 29, the rest of the chapter. But 1 Chronicles 9 again ends with kind of another genealogy of Saul, similar to the one you just had in the last chapter in chapter 8. But it kind of shows Saul's record. Now, it's also interesting that this is set up, but Saul, who is of the tribe of Benjamin, remember how we gave time to that discussion, Saul is the tribe of Benjamin, and we know that Saul will be cut off because Jesus does not come through the house and lineage of Saul. He doesn't go through the tribe of Benjamin. Jesus comes through the house and lineage of David, through the tribe of Judah. So once David is set up, that dynasty will remain. Remember all those dynasties in the north? 9 different dynasties, 9 different families. Only one family in the south, because Jesus is of the house and lineage of David. Just keep that in mind because that is extremely, extremely important. Wow, a lot there. So even though, as we came to the end of 1 Kings, it described the end of Judah, which we're going to describe again as we move forward into 2 Chronicles. Because 1 and 2 Chronicles, let me just say this as we close. 1 and 2 Chronicles will again record the history of Israel. But this is important. While the writings of Samuel and Kings record both the northern and southern kingdom, the united monarchy, the divided monarchy, the north and the south, Chronicles will only focus on the southern kingdom because this is the predominant tribe that is coming back, and this is the way you trace back from David to get forward eventually in the New Testament to Jesus. Important to remember that. That's why Chronicles, the first 9 chapters of 1 Chronicles, is so important, providing this bridge. Again, what 4 functions do these first 9 chapters accomplish? Number 1, they provide us with the Levitical line. Number 2, the priestly line, which comes out of Levi. Number 3, the kingly line of David. And number 4, the genealogy that leads to Jesus. That's why these 9 chapters are so important. God bless you. Read his word, and you'll get a blessing out of it.